Okay, okay. Today we're not going to talk about any specific topic because I'm going to get people telling me or sending me messages telling me that I'm not telling the truth or I'm sharing information that's not reliable, it's fake news, and call me names. So let's go over something that everyone can agree with today: how to spot misinformation and how to stop fake news. And this is from the International Federation of, let me see, it's the International Federation of Libraries Association. So it's an organization you can look up. It's IFLA, the acronym for it. So you can Google that information. See, it's a well-known organization throughout the country and even international that works with libraries to educate people. And they even have workshops to teach people how to spot fake news. So if you check in your local library, they might offer courses in how to detect fake news and disinformation and misinformation online. Okay, let's go over this real quick. It has several tips. The first one is consider the source. Whenever you see a news story online and you see anything on social media, maybe Facebook or maybe Instagram or anywhere online, always consider the source, see where it's coming from. People have the tendency, depending on their ideology, if it comes from, like, say, CNN, they might be like, oh, that's liberal crap. Or if you're a liberal, you might say, oh, that's fake news. No, I'm not going to look at it. Always look at both sides. That's a good way to make good objective views, and you can fact check them both. Now, you consider the source. If it's mainstream media, usually they tend to be more reliable. And I mean, some people might say, no, they're corporate media, they're corrupt. But the thing is, they call the presidential elections. They call who won this time. They said who won 4 years ago. So we can say you guys rely on them in some level, right? And when they report news like the plane crash, they reported the crash. You're not going to believe them. You have to believe them. Now, the other thing that you need to consider is the online websites that they're not really established mainstream media, but they talk about like Huffington Post or Daily Beast, which are liberal leaning. And we have, for example, Breitbart and The Blaze, conservative leaning, right? So, but you need to consider their information, you need to fact check their information, revise their information. You don't eat it up and believe it, because they lean one way or the other. Now, you also have to consider those websites that have names that are kind of, they sound biased to begin with. When you see, for example, conservativenews.com or liberalnews.com or trumpnews.com, that from the get-go, you know that's biased. So you cannot just believe it from, say, oh, that's true. That's just by default biased. So you cannot go with that. You have to fact check news stories you find in websites that are obviously leaning one side or the other. They're not truly objective. We can agree on that. Now, number two, read beyond the title and a few words. When you read a story, most people just read a few words because maybe they don't have time, they're at work, or they don't want to read the whole story because they feel, I don't know, lazy, or they want to do something more fun or whatever. You need to read the full story to make sure that you're reading and getting all the details, so you can back up your story. And this happens all the time. And the thing is, even mainstream media, sometimes they use titles to make people believe something that it's not. So it's not fake news. They've always done that. They use catchy titles to get you to make an assumption, and then you don't read the story and you realize, uh-oh. So that's why. And I'll give you an example. The crash that happened in Washington, D.C. Over a week ago with the plane and the helicopter, where Trump said that it was, oh, it's DEI. It's false. DEI's program policies, they're to blame. That's pretty much what he said. And everybody from MAGA world and conservative world ran with it, and people defending it. And when there is no evidence of such. And I'll give you an example. Washington Times, which is a conservative-leaning publication, they they had this article called FAA's diversity hiring practices were under scrutiny long before the air disaster in Washington. And then you read this story, and they start talking about a lawsuit that was filed against the FFA years ago about some prospect and employees, the candidates that were never hired, and they were suing for DEI practices because they said something along the lines that minorities were being picked over them, even though they were more qualified. But you have to read the story. But as you read the story, this story centers around a lot of that. And then when you read this article, and I'm sorry, this paragraph in the story where it says clearly, there is no evidence the accident that happened had anything to do with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. So they admit it, but they just bring something from the past to mix it up. And people assume that, oh, it was DEI. No, you have to read the story and then you realize so far to this day, there is no evidence that programs having to do with DEI caused the accident. To this day, it's just assumptions and people saying it online, just following what the Lion King says. Okay, number 3, check the author. This is something that people should do all the time. When you see a news story, check the author's name and also Google them. Get their name, last name, highlight it, copy, paste, put it in Google, and find out who they are. If they are liberal leaning, they're conservative leaning. So when you read the story, you say, oh, okay, this person leans conservative. This person leans liberal. So you get to see where they come from. Sometimes you find there are not really well-known reporters or journalists. Sometimes they're made-up names. Sometimes you cannot find anything on Google about them. Sometimes the articles don't even have names. Sometimes they just have something that says like written by editorial. Who's editorial? And that should be a red flag when you go to those websites. When you find no names, like I said, you have to find information about the website itself in reporters and addresses and phone numbers and email addresses of the company and staff. But if you don't find that gives you a red flag there. You always have that in mind. And supporting sources that you have to find in the stories you read. For example, when you read a story, you have to find those links in the story that tell you about something about this story. For example, the story of the FAA lawsuit. You have to go through the story, and when you see the link to the lawsuit, click into the link of the lawsuit and find out details about the lawsuit. What is the lawsuit about specifically? So you don't make assumptions. So that's something you have to have in mind when you read in the article. Click those links through the story and research the links where they take you. Because sometimes they don't take you anywhere. You find that the story is kind of partially not entirely solid. So you have to make sure the story is very solid, backed by the links that are reliable. So do that. Follow and check those sources. I know a lot of people are busy with their life. They don't have time to do it. But if you really want to be on top of the game and find out what is fake and what is not, you need to do that. Also, something, I'm sorry, something that happens sometimes, the date. Sometimes people publish stories of things that happened a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and people just eat it up, and then, oh my God, they just happened, and then they share it. And I know a couple of examples. I know that someone reported a story about, I think it was an undocumented immigrant who reported had committed a crime. And this was maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And then they shared it again online. I think it was on Facebook or somewhere like that. And people were sharing it again. And then I looked at the date of the story. And I was like, this happened 3 years ago. And people were thinking it happened just now, a week ago, 2 days ago, or 3 days ago. And it's like 3 years ago. They're recycling something that already happened to create hysteria and drama again. Something that happened also in 2020, it did not go circulated very largely, but it happened. Briefly, people were circulating the story of Hillary Clinton running in 2020 against Trump again. And people were sharing that story. And then people realized it was a story from 2016 or 2015 when she launched her campaign. but people were not paying attention. They're like, oh my God, Hillary's running again. And you check the date, she was not running. And people were sharing it. So always check the date of those stories that you get online. Number 6, is it a joke? Many times people, they share something thinking it's real, and it's satire. Like, The Onion or Babylon Bee. Sometimes it's so outrageous, that it's a joke. But sometimes the border on like fake news, that you don't know if it's really a joke or not. When you see those news stories, see the source. It's kind of like going back to the first one. Check the source. Who wrote the story? And you see, oh, Babylon Bee, okay, it's fake. It's satire. It's The Onion. Oh, it's satire. Sometimes they make those satire stories a little bit bordering tricky, So check those too. Now, you also have to check your bias, your own bias, whether you're a liberal, you're a conservative, or you're whatever you are. Check your own values and beliefs. So when you read a story, you always tend to believe and lean more on the story and believe it more because of your own bias. See, that's it. And you have to wait and analyze the story, check the sources, and don't assume because of your own beliefs. And it goes back to the story I told you about the FFA crash. In that story, I have dealt with people online arguing with me that it was the fault of DEA policies. And then the person that shared the story with me online, this one from the Washington Times, he shared that to me. He said, here's the proof. And I read the story and I was like, no, it says in there, when I read that paragraph in the story, in the middle of the story at the end, he said, DI had nothing to do with this, right, as far as the investigation shows so far. But he believes the whole thing because most of the story talks about the lawsuit from years ago that has nothing to do with the crash. So there's no evidence that crash last week had anything to do with those policies. So your bias, always thinking your bias, oh my God, don't run with it. Pause yourself and say, wait, my own beliefs can make me believe something that maybe it's not true, okay? Now let's go with the one that's a little debatable with a lot of people. Ask the experts. And a lot of experts, they say, a lot of people say, I'm not going to ask experts or check with fact checkers or with experts or professors or people in the field. Somebody, I don't know if it's education, check with the educator. If it's a police officer, check with the police forces. And then people say, but who's going to check them? Follow the same steps with them. Everything they tell you, ask them for their source. If you talk to a librarian, if you talk to a professor, if you talk to a police officer, if you talk to if you check a fact check website, follow the same steps. Fact check them too. Follow their links, everything. So make sure you fact check that. So those are the steps to find fake news or to avoid misinformation and disinformation and not spread anything and confuse this world even more. Okay. Anyway, that's about it. And I hope I went a little bit too long on this one, but I had to. I needed to. So please, out there, check those fake news and kill them. Don't share them. Delete them. And also memes. People don't believe memes. Check those memes. Don't believe a meme. Because if you see a meme, somebody sharing a meme, fact check it. And don't say, oh, it's fake. Oh, it's true. No. Fact check it. Go to Google and copy words and fact check them. Search. Okay. Till next time, guys. Hasta la vista.